You may have seen this before. A bottle gourd plant that looks full and healthy. Long vines, large green leaves, everything spreading nicely across the support. It grows for weeks, sometimes months. You wait patiently. And then, just when the fruits begin to appear, something changes. The small gourds start to turn yellow. Some shrink. Others soften and slowly rot before they ever become usable. What looked like a strong plant suddenly gives you very little in return. Weeks of growth, lost in just a few days. It feels confusing, because the plant looks so alive. But here is something that often surprises many gardeners. More leaves does not always mean more food. In fact, sometimes it means the opposite. After watching this pattern repeat over many seasons, one thing becomes clear. This is not about effort. It is about understanding a quiet balance inside the plant. And once that balance shifts, the outcome can change in a very simple way. If this feels frustrating, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not doing anything wrong. Before explaining why this happens, it helps to understand what the plant is really doing as it grows. When we look at a bottle gourd plant, we often focus on how big it becomes. We see the leaves spreading, the vines climbing, and we feel encouraged. Growth is happening. But there is a difference between growing and producing. A plant can grow very well and still fail to give a good harvest. This is because the plant is always making choices about where to send its energy. Sometimes it sends more energy into leaves and stems. At other times, it shifts that energy into flowers and fruits. In the early stages, strong leaf growth is helpful. It allows the plant to gather sunlight and build strength. But if this continues for too long, the plant may stay focused on growing instead of producing. It becomes full, but not fruitful. This shift is very quiet. There is no clear signal. The plant still looks healthy. But inside, the balance is slightly off. Many beginners do not notice this, because everything appears normal on the surface. Over time, this hidden imbalance leads to small fruits that fail to develop properly. They may start well, but they do not receive enough consistent support from the plant. And slowly, they begin to decline. Understanding this difference is the first step. Because once you see that growth and production are not the same, you begin to look at the plant in a new way. Now, when this plant is growing in a pot, something else begins to influence this balance. And this is often overlooked. A container changes how the plant behaves. In the ground, roots can spread freely. They search for water, nutrients, and space. But in a pot, the roots are limited. They can only grow within a fixed boundary. This restriction quietly affects the entire plant. When roots feel confined, they begin to adjust the plant's priorities. Sometimes they hold on to moisture longer. Sometimes they respond quickly to changes in watering. And sometimes they encourage more leaf growth instead of fruiting. Water behaves differently in pots as well. It can stay longer than expected, especially if the drainage is not perfect. At the same time, during hot weather, it can dry out faster near the surface. This creates a cycle that is not always steady. Because of this, the plant experiences small shifts again and again. Too much moisture at one time. Slight dryness at another. These changes may seem small, but they influence how the plant uses its energy. This is why a bottle gourd plant in a pot may look just as healthy as one in the ground, but produce very different results. It is not weaker. It is simply responding to a different environment. And within this environment, there is one common habit that many gardeners follow, thinking it will help. But often, it does the opposite. It is very natural to care for a plant by giving it more water and more nutrients. It feels like the right thing to do. A healthy plant should need more support, we think. But sometimes, too much care creates a different problem. When a bottle gourd plant receives too much water, the roots remain constantly wet. This reduces the air around them. Roots need both water and air to function well. Without that balance, they become less efficient. At the same time, too much feeding can encourage the plant to produce more leaves. The plant feels comfortable and continues to grow outward. But it does not feel the need to shift toward fruiting. So instead of helping the plant produce more gourds, this extra care keeps it in a growing stage for longer than needed. This is not a mistake. It is a very common and understandable approach. Many gardeners do this because they want to support the plant. But the plant responds in its own way. When we begin to reduce this excess, even slightly, something interesting starts to happen. The plant slowly changes its focus. And this change becomes most visible at a very specific moment in the plant's life. There is a stage that is easy to miss. It happens between the flower and the fruit. This is where many bottle gourds quietly fail. You may notice flowers appearing on the vine. Some are male, and some are female. The female flowers have a small shape behind them, which looks like a tiny gourd. This is the early stage of fruit. But for this small fruit to grow, pollination must happen. The pollen from the male flower needs to reach the female flower. In open ground, insects often help with this. Bees, for example, move from flower to flower. In a potted setup, especially in balconies or enclosed spaces, this process may not happen as easily. The flowers bloom, but pollination remains incomplete. As a result, the tiny fruit begins to form, but it does not develop fully. After a short time, it starts to yellow and shrink. This is often mistaken for a nutrient issue or watering problem. But in many cases, it is simply a missed pollination moment. This stage is very brief. It happens quietly and passes quickly. But it plays a very important role in the final harvest. Once you begin to notice this stage, the pattern becomes clearer. And you start to understand why some fruits grow well while others do not. At the same time, the surrounding environment also plays a strong role in how the plant behaves. Climate has a direct effect on bottle gourd plants, even when they are growing in pots. Temperature, humidity, and airflow all influence how the plant uses its energy. In warm and humid conditions, the plant may grow very quickly. Leaves become large, and vines spread fast. But high humidity can also reduce effective pollination. Pollen may become sticky, and insects may be less active. In dry climates, the opposite can happen. The plant may struggle with moisture loss. Flowers may dry out quickly, and the plant may not sustain fruit development for long. Airflow is also important. In still air, moisture can stay on leaves and flowers for longer periods. This can affect both pollination and overall plant health. This is why the same method does not always give the same result in every place. A gardener in one region may water more often, while another may water less. Both may be correct for their environment. Understanding your own conditions becomes more helpful than following a fixed rule. The plant responds to what it experiences around it. And once you begin to see these patterns, a simple shift becomes possible. Instead of trying to increase growth, the focus moves toward balance. Watering becomes more controlled. Not too frequent, and not too delayed. The soil is allowed to dry slightly between watering, giving roots a chance to breathe. Spacing becomes important. Vines are guided gently so that air can move freely between leaves. This reduces excess moisture and supports better flower health. Feeding becomes lighter and more thoughtful. Instead of pushing the plant to grow, the goal becomes supporting steady fruit development. These are not large changes. They are small adjustments. But together, they signal the plant to shift its energy. Slowly, you begin to see fewer failed fruits. The gourds that form start to grow more steadily. They hold their shape and continue developing instead of fading away. This is the point where the plant begins to respond differently. And once fruits begin to grow well, another gentle habit helps ensure that nothing goes to waste. Timing the harvest is one of the simplest ways to protect your yield. Bottle gourds are best picked when they are still tender. If left on the vine for too long, they become hard and lose their quality. Sometimes, they may even begin to spoil before you notice. The change happens gradually. The skin thickens, the inside becomes firm, and the taste is affected. By the time it is visible, it is often too late. But when you observe the size and texture closely, you begin to recognize the right moment. The gourd feels firm but not hard. The skin is smooth, and the color is fresh. Harvesting at this stage encourages the plant to continue producing more fruits. It also prevents the loss of what has already grown. This habit does not require extra effort. It simply asks for a little attention at the right time. And as you continue to observe the plant, small details begin to guide you. Leaves can tell you about the plant's condition. If they are too dark and dense, it may mean excess feeding. If they begin to droop slightly, it may be a sign of watering needs. Flowers can show you whether pollination is happening. Healthy, open flowers attract activity. Closed or drying flowers may need a closer look. Fruits themselves give the clearest signal. When they grow steadily, it means the plant is in balance. When they stop or shrink, it is a sign to adjust gently. These observations reduce the need for constant action. Instead of doing more, you begin to do less, but with better understanding. If you are comfortable sharing, I am curious how your bottle gourd plant behaves in your space. Do you notice more leaves, or more fruits? Over time, gardening becomes less about effort and more about awareness. The plant begins to guide you, and you learn to respond quietly. There is no need to rush. No need to force growth. The plant already knows what to do. It simply needs the right balance to express it. And sometimes, the most helpful thing we can do is step back slightly and allow that balance to settle. Because in many cases, the garden improves not when we do more, but when we begin to understand what truly matters. Sometimes the garden improves when we simply step back and observe.